Hello, everyone, and welcome to Full-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. I'm your host, Ash Woolford. Joining me today for Arsenal review and a quick talk about recent news is AJ. How you doing, buddy?
Good sir, good sir.
Thanks for coming on. Drew, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing okay, mate. Probably about the same as most of the Fulham faithful.
Yeah, it's a quick one. There's not really loads to cover in terms of talking about the Arsenal game on Saturday. I think most of us have had our say on social media over the last couple of days. I think it's been quite clear that most of the Fulham fan base have a similar viewpoint on the last couple of weeks' views. I think realistically, if we're going to sum it up quickly before we talk about some moments in the game, not disappointed with the result. I was expecting to get absolutely hammered. I was disappointed in some of the aspects of the game, but also quite pleased considering the fact that we had four first team players out, and after half an hour playing with a complete second string back four, thought we did pretty well to keep Arsenal out considering their prowess from set pieces. A couple of things that we are going to cover from the game though, before we go on and talk about other news is injuries. AJ, we were moaning a lot pre-game. We were really worried pre-game about the amount of players we already had out injured, and the club aren't always open with exactly what's going on now. Long players going to be out for. Is it now even more of a concern? It looks like potentially we've lost another two players for the Newcastle game coming up this weekend.
Yeah, and it's going to be a continued concern going forwards and we'll get onto it later as you mentioned, but if we continue to play the same crop of players over and over and over again, and then play some of them through injuries or after they've just come back from injury, we're going to really struggle. Like, the only one I can give credit to actually giving time to recover, apart from allowing him to go on international duty, because I don't know why the hell we did that, is Anthony Robinson. Everyone else has been forced back way too quickly, come back from injury, caught another knock, out again. It's all just been the same circulation. And then we're at a position where we've got the most injuries we've ever had in one period in Premier League history for Fulham, and we're wondering why. Well, it's because we were playing people who needed surgeries at the back end of last season instead of playing kids, or instead of giving other players the opportunity. It's just ridiculous. The injury concerns will continue to trouble us probably until the new year, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's going to get even more worrying considering AFCON this season as well. The size of the squad. December could be very tight for Fulham, and it's not an easy month on paper. It's a lot of tough London games and Burnley away, which it's never easy. Before we sort of break down a couple of that moments of action, and there are a couple of actual positives from the game on Saturday, if you ask me. Uh, One of them is Jorge Cuenca. Drew, we know we spoke about Cuenca before, about games he's come in, he's been impressive and he's looked good. We were all probably a little bit shocked that Bassi didn't start on Saturday, but just how good was Jorge Cuenca? He was superb on Saturday. I thought he did not look out of place at all. And if anything, he actually eases some of my concerns about AFCON in December, because I think we have someone who can actually play that left centre back role quite well.
Yeah, I endorse all of that. I think Cuenca's a first team player. I think that the drop off between him and Bassi, I don't think is as big as a drop off between Anderson and Diop. That's probably about the biggest compliment I can give him. I mean, we'll talk about I suppose we'll talk about the game going forward, but I was surprised he went off when Bassi came on. I thought that the obvious move would have been to bring Bassi on instead of Cess, move Cess forward and Iwobi inside to cover for Kenny, and then bring Kevin on for Wilson and play him as an orthodox right winger. Because I mean, Cess, this is not a criticism of Cess at all. I thought he did really well. But the point I'm making is Cuenca would have been, in my view, more than capable and warranted being left in that left centre back spot. And I would have brought in Bassi to left back because I thought Cuenca was immense. I genuinely thought Cuenca was immense. If I'm a scout and I'm watching that, I'm asking myself, why isn't he starting for a Premier League team? Because I can honestly say, every time I've seen him, he's impressed me. I thought, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say he's the second coming of Cannavaro or anything like that, but he was fantastic. He was fantastic, and arguably a big reason that we kept Arsenal at bay.
Yeah, I also think that after a couple of weeks of criticism, I thought Sander Berg played really well on Saturday.
Yeah.
He would have to cover an awful lot of ground, considering that obviously Tom Kennedy's next to him, and we all know that Tom Kennedy's not Sasha Lukic when it comes to putting a tackle in, as good as he is at getting his foot on the ball. We have to talk about some of the moments in the game, obviously. Some of the disappointing things that come out of the game on Saturday is we had 0 shots on target. And I know we're playing against an Arsenal team that have managed to do that for like 3-4 games in a row now. They've managed to keep their opposition down to next to no shots. It's a bit annoying and frustrating considering some of the chances we did have. Harry Wilson, in particular, probably wasted 4 or 5 chances on Saturday. Some people would say that's a bit harsh because 2 or 3 of them were sort of snapshots out of nothing, which is fair enough. But 1 or 2, he had a bit more time than he actually gave himself. And wayward shots from it weren't really that great. And it's becoming a bit of a concern for us in games where it's like feast or famine in front of goal. We either have loads of shots on target or we have none, and it's starting to get a bit concerning. One of the things that is very obvious, talking about our injuries, is we are clearly missing our 2 wing backs in Tete and Jedi, because the overlapping run and style of play they have and getting the ball in the box was missing so much on Saturday. I was really frustrated. I was frustrated at Rayoul, but it wasn't Rayoul I was frustrated with. It was one of those moments where 4 or 5 times, especially in the second half, the ball goes out wide and he's the one out wide with the ball, and there's no one in the box to cross it to. And you're just like, you're meant to be the man in the box, not the man crossing the ball, which is a bit frustrating. I'm trying to cover the game real quick, obviously, because there are bigger things we want to talk about. Because conceding against Arsenal from a set piece, water's wet, it happens. Everyone does it. Overall, I'm not frustrated by the game on Saturday. I'm actually quite happy with some of the responses from the players, considering what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. It would just be nice if we had a bit more going forward. And some of that is going to be what we're going to talk about in a minute when we talk about Marco Silva and other things going forward, because we all have gripes and things we want to say as much as we love the man about some of the things that happen. Quickly, before we move on and talk about the news, though, lads, I just want to get a man of the match from both of you for the game on Saturday, because we always give one. AJ, can I just get a man of the match from you, please, for Saturday?
Can't think of anyone other than Cuenca, to be fair, all things considered. Like, everyone was decent, but we were just pulling a cart along, as it were. We didn't expect anything from the game. We didn't get anything from the game. We plodded along. We didn't open ourselves up too much. I think Cuenca has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, me too. And you, Drew?
I thought I take your point about Raul. I thought he was immense. Amount of work he put in. The thing that got me is that as Kearney and his influence waned, Arsenal became more involved in the game, and arguably, I mean, I think I tweeted. No, I didn't tweet. I put into our group chat, Kearney needs to come off about 10 minutes before he got injured, because he was running out of steam, and we were naturally dropping deeper. And it wasn't really until we saw Iwobi move into midfield and Kevin come on that we got more of a drive from midfield. I thought Cesc had a very good game. I think, we didn't see much of Saka. Those of our regular watchers will know I've given Leno some stick over the recent few weeks because he seems to be reluctant to come for crosses and punches, but he was definitely more dominant and he punched the ball away a few times, which I thought was good. But I'm afraid I'm going to side with AJ on this. I thought Cuenca, bearing in mind he doesn't play a lot of first team football, I thought he was excellent. Anderson had a reasonably good game, but bless him, he got injured.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm gonna and Bergay, I absolutely accept Ash everything you say about him. He looked like the Bergay of earlier in the season. I thought he was really good, but yeah, I'm giving it to Cuenca because he deserves it.
Yeah.
Castagna had a
But
much
for
better
me,
game as well.
100% for me, what I will add from my talking about players in the whole back four, considering that from 30 minutes onwards, it's complete second string in the sense of they're not the usual starting four. They were superb. You know, the Arsenal got some very good attacking players, and Saka being one of them, who we all know how good he is. Anyone who watches England play knows how good he is. We kept him relatively quiet. You know, I think that Berger looked good considering Kenny was the player next to him. I think if anything, that just adds weight to the whole. I don't think Lukic and Berger can play together argument, but that's a problem we'll deal with when Lukic is back. It has to be Cuenca for me. He was just superb, really. And Ryan Session also, I thought, had a really good game. First half, he was really, really good. Sort of waned a bit at the end, but no real shock. Right, let's move on. Obviously, and let's talk about the big news that came out this weekend. Obviously, we know that Nottingham Forest had sacked Ange Postecoglou just after their early kickoff game on Saturday. Sunday news comes out that Marco Silva is potentially in line, obviously, for that job. Uh, Subsequently, today we find out that he's probably not likely to get that job, which is a good thing for us. But I think it was quite interesting the conversation going on between Fulham fans on Twitter yesterday, especially a lot of people like me who I don't maybe came across they were resigned to losing Marco. Maybe some came across that they didn't really care if we lost Marco. I don't think that's the case. I think it's an awful lot of people just really frustrated at Marco's situation at Fulham at the moment. You know, an awful lot of talk about ceiling and play and managers meeting theirs. With Marco, I don't necessarily personally, I don't think it's him meeting his ceiling. I think it's his ambition outweighs our ownership's ambition massively. And we've now reached that head where it's like, is he going to sign? Is he going to get given a new contract? Rumors are today he's been offered one. Is he going to want to sign it, considering how much ownership actually has some things going on with it? First part of this news coming out, obviously, was the interview that came out with Shad Khan on Friday with Talksport. Anyone who listened to it, I know AJ did. There was some really concerning moments in that interview, namely around about talking about ambition and Marco, but then also talking about the way that our management structure is at the club in terms of the ownership and roles within. Can you explain to me your feelings on the interview with him and sort of the contradictions and some of the things that frustrate you coming from it?
That me, yeah?
Yeah, please, buddy. Sorry.
Yeah, no. It just felt like he was trying to validate himself and his decisions while also sort of giving the typical spiel of, yeah, we've got ambition. Football clubs are known for ambition based on what they do, not on what their owners come out and say in the press. Like, 9 times out of 10, when an owner comes out and says they've got ambition, but there's crap going on behind closed doors, it's because something's going wrong. Look at Cardiff's ownership when they changed the badge and said they wanted to be in a Champions League and all of that nonsense. Swansea's ownership when they said the same thing about going into the Champions League. And I don't know how I picked two Welsh clubs out of a hat, but two examples there. It's like it's just a bit redundant when you're not doing the right things off the pitch to make it happen. Like, no one questioned Liverpool when they got Klopp in and they weren't talking about the ambitions, they were making it happen. It's the difference in that, and it felt like he was saying the decisions he's made around the club and then justifying it with this "we've got ambition" moniker. Well, clearly you don't know your arse from your elbow then, because you're not doing the right things to make it happen. It's a little bit disappointing, frankly, and it means that we're not going to get anywhere anytime soon, in my opinion, while we have this structure in place. It's sad to see, because we see the likes of Newcastle, Aston Villa, who were in the Championship with us when we were in the Championship at one point or another. Both clubs were. We came up before Villa and then ended up going back down and having to come back again after them. No one bats an eyelid about Newcastle or Villa competing in the Champions League, but little old Fulham even considers playing in any part of Europe. We're laughed at because of the way we hold ourselves as a club. And the only way to change that is from the top down. And it's not going to happen under this ownership.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. It leads on to the conversation, obviously, that was leading most of our thoughts yesterday, talking about Marco Silva. Drew, we've had this conversation between us a few times. I know that you were on Twitter having this conversation as well as I was yesterday. The feeling around Marco Silva and the potential of him leaving yesterday. What do you put it down to, that some of us were actually not that scared of losing him? Is it just the bored of the every time a good job comes up, he gets linked to it, and we have to go through the same rigmarole over and over again? Or is it more just a case of we have had enough of his ambition compared to the ownership, but also the way that he tries to make a point of certain things, like not playing certain players, not playing youth players, like stuff like that. How do you express your feeling towards the idea of losing him?
Um, I mean, I'm not one of those people that would be jumping for joy if we lost him. My position is one more of there's an air of inevitability about it for me, so I'm resigned to it. I went on record, I think, at the beginning of the season, and I was pretty confident that this was Silva's last season. Nothing that's happened, in my view, has changed my mind. People are saying, I mean, I saw one tweet from a Fulham fan saying, "Oh, I'm 90% sure he's going to stay now." Yeah, or sorry, he's going to sign a new contract. Why? Why? He's not. He's not. Bearing in mind how hard he's worked to rehabilitate his image, following walking out of Hull and then Watford and the disaster at Everton, to leave Fulham mid-season for a club that has got a trigger-happy chairman doesn't seem to be in keeping with everything that he's done at Fulham in order to rehabilitate his image. He's obviously been quite diplomatic. I mean, it's been published today that the Khans have offered him a new deal, but he wants to focus on the season in hand. I mean, let's be honest, he's not going to turn around mid-season and tell them to do one, is he? And risk destabilising the players or revealing his hand. Yeah. If he does want to leave the club, he doesn't want to burn bridges at Fulham, because if he's got no offer that he likes, he still needs a job. So he's being very, very smart. The Forest interest, I don't believe, got any further than paper talk. My understanding was that Silva let it be known he wasn't keen to leave Fulham mid-season, and also Forest have just spent a small fortune on managers. And Marco, if you believe the figures, his release clause is anywhere between 7 and 15 million. Now that is a lot of money on top of paying Ange Postecoglou for the remainder of his contract. But once again, Ash, I've digressed, so I apologise. I don't think that. I mean, some Fulham fans went into complete meltdown. Oh, if he goes, we get relegated. I don't believe that. My concern is that if he does go, and I think he will, who's out there? Who are we going to get that's better? Now, you get some Khan aficionados on Twitter and social media saying, well, they found Marco Silva. But they also found Felix Magath, and they also found Claudio Ranieri. Yeah. They managed to blow out Slavisa Djukanovic. Yeah. So it's not as straightforward as that. And going back to AJ's point, I mean, Khan has made it clear that part of the Pakistani culture is working with families. I've got no problem with that. But we need a full-time director of football. Yeah, it's just an insult to the club that we've got a director of football who's at best part-time, and his main interest is not Fulham Football Club. I don't care what anyone says. I know he's desperate to show that his father, he can run the empire when his father finally decides to step down. And I know nepotism is key. But, I mean, Parker had a problem with the management structure. Djukanovic wasn't a big fan. We know Silva has rubbed up against it. So, I mean, you made this interesting point. I mean, I don't believe Marco has reached his ceiling. We've reached the ceiling with Marco because of Marco. I believe Marco may feel that he's taken the club as far as he can.
Yeah,
that's where I'm coming from. Now, Ash, your points about him being incredibly stubborn are well made. Yeah. For example, when we're down to no strikers and we've got a kid on the bench, I appreciate he's a kid, but it's next man up. Yeah, I mean, you've highlighted the issue with injuries. I mean, we talked about this at the end of. There was a show at the end of last season, Ash, that we talked about how an older squad was just running to the ground and we had no energy, and it's no coincidence that the two players that got injured on Saturday were two of our more senior pros. You know, and it's a recurrent thing. You just can't. I mean, like I said, I thought Raul was heroic. I thought he was heroic, and I take your point, Ash, about you want him in the centre because he's a striker and he's our best finisher, and all. I totally get that. But I mean, he just ran and he just ran and he just ran. But he's 34 years old.
Yeah,
he's
coming back from an injury.
Yeah, he's 34 years old. Yeah, I mean, you know, we spent a small fortune on Kevin. Yet you're telling me that Iwobi's a better winger. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Iwobi will still be playing while he's on international duty for the AFCON. Marco Silva will still find a way to start him.
Yeah, AJ, I don't have a problem with Iwobi starting, but Iwobi is not a better winger than Kevin, and nothing you're going to tell me is going to make me change my mind.
No.
I think Silva won't have it.
He's not a better winger
for
than
me,
Cess.
He's not a better winger. The problem for me is that when we look at Marco Silva, and let's look at Marco Silva as a whole thing, right? Because every single one of us love Marco Silva. There's no anyone who's watched this. I don't want anyone to think this is us hating on him, because we all love him. We love the job he's done with his 5 years at Fulham. He's taken us from a team that were abject losers to a team that actually can compete. But the problem with that is that, and this is where I talk about stubbornness, the way he does it means that we end up in a problem like we've got at the moment. We said in that episode of the show at the end of last season, where we were talking about running a team into a ground, that we're exceptionally lucky that we haven't had any injury crisis. Well, we've got one now. Like, we've got 6 players out injured going into a game against Newcastle away on Saturday, where we are looking unlikely. Yes, they're not all starters, but unlikely that we're going to be able to play a team that's going to compete against Newcastle at St James's Park, and we have to be open to that. And when you look at that, there's certain things you have to look into. You have to look at Marco Silva going, you're going to have to bend your will about the way that you play and you pick your teams to get us through this crisis at the moment. We know he doesn't really like playing youth players. He sort of had his hand turned with Josh King because Josh King is such an exceptional talent. You can't say no to him, right? And it is as simple as that. But you have to look at the bench on Saturday and realise there is some issues there, right? We moan about substitutions all the time. One of the subs that made the least amount of sense on Saturday was taking Cuenca off, who's having an outstanding game, and bringing on Calvin Bassey when you're chasing a game of football and you have a striker and another winger on the bench. It's getting to the point where you don't know if he's just trying to make a point, You don't know if it's just incompetence at some things. He doesn't see some things. One of the biggest problems for me on Saturday alone was Tom Cairney got injured in the 40th minute. Tom Cairney should have came off at half time, and he didn't. He'd already been down once or twice with a shoulder problem, and we just didn't make that change. And that's one of the problems with me with Marco. Like, I love Marco Silva because he's made us resilient. He's made us play. We can play against certain teams better than we've ever been able to play against them. The problem with that is teams that don't try to play football against us tend to get results against us, and that's the seesaw with Marco Silva. I wasn't really that worried about losing Marco Silva yesterday when the news came out about him. Not because I don't care if he left, because you are right, Drew. There's not many names out there that I would want to come in for him. For me, there's only really one or two, and they're more potential managers for 2-3 years time rather than right now. Everyone knows how much I love Liam Rossini and champion him, but even I know it would be a risk to bringing him in now compared to what he'll be in like 2-3 years time. But to get through that, we have to look at Marco Silva and the situation we're in. We're in a situation where our ownership and our management team are going to have to either come to some sort of compromise where, we're actually going to see some improvement and some sort of leveling up, or they just have to be open and honest with each other that this is that ceiling we're talking about. I don't think Marco Silva has reached his ceiling with Fulham. I think the ownership has met their ceiling with Marco Silva. And the amount they're willing to spend to back him to give him what he wants. That's my problem. I back Marco Silva more than I back the ownership any day of the week because I don't trust them. And one of the biggest concerns, and AJ, you made it yourself. It's not a case of losing Marco Silva that worries me. It's replacing him that worries me.
Yeah, I've got a theory on Marco Silva's contract situation. The World Cup's in the summer, and if Portugal have a bad campaign, it's very possible that opportunity becomes available. And if he's completely free and doesn't cost anything, he's a very easy appointment for the Portuguese FA. And that's a job that he would leave us for. Maybe that's what he's waiting for, to see what happens with Portugal in the World Cup.
One of the things that I think he's also waiting for is I think he's had 2 or 3 really frustrating transfer windows at Fulham where he's not been backed quite like he should have done. We were all livid last January when we didn't sign anybody all January until Willian, a day after the transfer window had shut on a free. Right, we were livid with that because it meant that we knew what was coming up for us for the rest of the season. Right, we knew what we were going to see for the rest of that season. We were going to see abject nothingness, and that's exactly what we got. You look at this. You look at it now, and I personally think if Marco Silva's going to sign a contract to Fulham, it will probably be in February after we've seen how he's been backed in January. Because if he isn't, it ain't happening, and I think it's as simple as that. I don't want to lose Marco Silva, but I fully understand why Marco Silva would have had enough and be like, I'm done. Like, I can't do anything else.
If Mark,
I completely get it. Go on, AJ.
just going back to what I mentioned about the World Cup, if Marco genuinely waits it out to see what happens with Portugal, we could spend a period of the summer with no manager waiting to see if Marco signs a new contract, which could leave us chasing tails again next January, like we did next summer, like we did this summer. That could be dangerous.
You see that AJ is a crucial point. I mean, look at the contract negotiations over the summer.
Oh.
Tete. We seem to be genuinely surprised that his contract expired. Josh King. Josh King. I was amazed we managed to pin down. I mean, Ryan Sessegnon. Yeah, I mean, he's in the last year of his 2-year deal, isn't he? Because he only had a 2-year deal at Fulham.
Yeah.
Anyone that thinks Ryan Sessegnon isn't worth a new 4 or 5-year deal is mental. But we're not doing anything about it. Yeah, and I just don't understand. I don't understand. I mean, why a professionally run club or a professional club, I don't say professionally run, it might be pitching it a bit too high, isn't isn't already over this?
Mhm.
You know, why are we talking about Ryan Sessegnon getting into the last 12 months of his deal? I mean, when it was quite clear in the final third of the last season he was getting back to what we knew. You know,
Mhm.
now I bear in mind Ryan. I mean, he's now a father. He's come home. He's rebuilt his life, rebuilt his career. I don't think we're at risk of losing him. But the principle is sound. And as for your point about Ash Marco signing in February, I don't see it. I don't see it. I genuinely don't. I think I want to be wrong. I want to be
Mm.
wrong. For those for our listeners now, I want to be wrong about all of this, but I just don't see a situation where Marco signs a new deal at Fulham. I just think deep down he's made up his mind.
I think
We have
realistically, I think so.
Sorry, go
I
on.
think realistically, with adding to what you just said there, my bit with that is one, I don't see the club being proactive enough to do the contract talks, which is the problem. We're just way too passive as a football club, which is part of why we keep losing good youth players and we keep losing players and having to fight for players during the summer, having to give Kenny Tete a 150% pay rise in order to keep him because we're not proactive enough. And you'd think financially the club would take the hit once or twice and realize, well, maybe we should change this, but they do. They don't, and that's the biggest problem for me. Is there are never any lessons learned, and part of the problem with that is the people that are higher up that make the choices within the club, right? There never are any lessons to learn. Every time the club makes a mistake, be that on the pit, be that with personnel, be that with decisions they make in the background, be that with decisions they make with building shit, right? Whenever anything goes wrong, there's never any lessons to be learned. It's always somebody else's fault. And I don't care what line of business you're in. No business ever succeeds with the attitude of it's always somebody else's fault, or we just didn't see it coming, and it really does concern me. With Marco, I hope and pray that we gets back in January and signs a contract in February. That would involve the club actually listening to what he wants and what we want, and doing that, and backing the club to actually maybe do something. My biggest concern is coming January is that we're not backing a manager to get Europe. We're backing a manager to make sure we survive, and that might be an issue. For me, I'd much rather lose the ownership than the manager, and I think that says an awful lot. AJ, have you got anything you want to add, mate?
No, I was just going to add on Drew's point about contracts that we've got 9 contracts expiring, including loan players, that run out in June. That I haven't really heard about a peep of any of them, to be honest.
Run the names, AJ, for us.
Yeah, of course. We'll start with the loan, which is Samuel Chukwueze, obviously.
He needs
You've
to be
then
made
got,
permanent.
well, I don't know, he's on 120 grand a week, so we have to consider that. But we've got Raul Jimenez, Adama Traore, Harry Wilson, Ryan Sessegnon, Tom Kearney, Jonah Kuseari, Luke Harris, and Stephen Bender.
Yeah, and realistically, I only see 2 of those staying.
Luke Harris
I
and
don't
Stephen
see.
Bender.
I think Stephen Bender naturally has probably found a place for himself at Millwall right now.
No, yeah.
Luke Harris, as much as I love the boy, he just can't stay fit enough to ever play for Fulham. He's injured way too often to even get a chance. Whatever loan he gets,
He shares a
half of
position
those
with
training.
King, so it's unlikely.
Yeah, exactly. Like Chukwueze, I want to keep because he's been great. 120 grand a week is a bit of an issue, but I doubt that's an issue, especially when you consider there's probably some natural churning that's going to happen at the end of the season. I imagine this is probably going to be the last year of Raul. Heavily rumored he wants to go back and finish his career in Mexico. Completely makes sense. I don't ever want to see Adama wear a Fulham shirt now, and he's contracted. So whatever, right? Tom Kearney, as we say, is probably likely to be his last year too. So it's a big summer for Fulham coming up potentially. There's going to be a lot of turnover, a lot of change, and you don't want that to be playing staff and managerial staff at the same time because that will be messy. And last time we went through something like this during the summer, we had one of the most woeful Premier League seasons we've ever seen, and we'll end up with a Scott Parker-esque manager with a Mitch-mash team, which has been put together by a wrestling promoter who doesn't really understand the game. It is one of those things that, lads, look, we can go on about this for hours, but we've already overrun massively, and I know there's loads we can talk about. All we can say is obviously we need to keep an eye on the situation with Marcus Silva coming up over the next couple of weeks, because who knows, this whole thing with Forest may kick some asses into gear, and we may see some action. Who knows? I don't think it's that mad that we've had all this yesterday come out about Forest, and today we're hearing about him being off the new contract for Fulham, as much as that may have been hinted at on Friday in the Carnes interview. If you haven't listened to that, I do fully suggest it's on TalkSport, that you go back and have a listen to anyone who wants to. It's painful, but it's some interesting stuff in there. If you're a Fulham fan, you sort of get to understand our place in priority with the ownership, and it is a bit what it is. Lads, we'll be back later on in the week, obviously, to prepare for Newcastle away this weekend. It's going to be a very tough game, a lot of injuries. We're all going to have to do a lot of deep diving into what we might potentially see in terms of a squad to actually know what we're talking about going into that game. Really not much more to say other than have a good week and come on, you Whites.